Well, good afternoon, good morning. I'm Judy Isles with the Papa John Center for Entrepreneurship. Thank you for coming today on a beautiful spring Iowa day to hear our guest speaker, Bruce Lerman. So this series started many, many years ago, and it is all because of Roy and Bobbi Reiman. So many know the Reimans as the Reiman Gardens family, but Roy is a very successful entrepreneur and made this program possible. So it's an opportunity for us to bring people to campus, to tell their entrepreneurship stories, offer advice for students, answer questions, and really engage. So we've had the opportunity to spend last night with Bruce and some of our SciStarter students. So I see some of them in the back for a really engaging conversation, some great advice. And we're going to tour the Student Innovation Center, and we've learned about startup factories. So hopefully, Bruce, you've been enlightened to all the fun things we're doing here to create people that are going to be like you someday, hopefully. We like to involve our students in our programs, and so today I am going to ask Micah Walker, who was a former SciStarter, to come up and introduce Bruce. Micah is all in for entrepreneurship at Iowa State. Among many of our programs, he was a 2022 cohort of SciStarters with the shoe design company Stratus. He's now in the Master of Entrepreneurship program, so you just can't get enough of entrepreneurship in the Ivy College of Business. He works with us at SciBiz Lab and has been there for a little over a year doing market research for startup companies. He also, can't get enough, is doing an internship with the state's InnoVenture program. So he's talking to people that are funding startups every day. And he seems like part of our team because he works out of our office, so we forget that he's really not a member of our staff. He is just a student, but he's kind of like a second son to many of us in the office. So Micah Walker, had the opportunity to meet Bruce. Please come and introduce our speaker today.
Thank you, Judy. Hello, everybody. As Judy said, my name is Micah Walker. I do a little bit of everything entrepreneurial around Iowa State University. I'd like to say Judy already kind of explained everything that I've done, but I like to say that a lot of people, when they grow up, their first dream is to be a football player or a basketball player. Mine was entrepreneurship. I wanted to create my own shoe when I was 5 years old. So now Iowa State has given me that opportunity to put my dreams to fruition. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to introduce Bruce Lerman. Bruce is a serial entrepreneur who started here in Iowa. He grew a lot of tech companies out of Iowa, and he also has a portfolio of over 40 startups as an angel investor as well. So Bruce is very tapped into the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Iowa. Mr. Lehrman is an Iowa State graduate as well. He got his bachelor's degree here at Iowa State University in marketing and also moved on. So he's a strong Iowa State supporter as well. Although he has ties in Iowa, he supports ISU through and through. I had the pleasure of meeting Bruce Lerman last night over dinner with a couple of other SciStarters, and one of the biggest takeaways I had from our conversation was tenacity. One of the things that we talked about was just, as entrepreneurs can have a lot of dreams and have a lot of aspirations, but being able to put those dreams and aspirations to work in an effective way is what really separates entrepreneurs. And that's one of the takeaways that I really got from Bruce, and that was something invaluable, especially from the perspective of an entrepreneur and an angel investor, seeing all different sides of it and understanding what he sees as a strong entrepreneur. Mr. Lerman is here today to talk about his journey as a startup founder and a leader, a mentor of startups, an experienced investor. And Bruce will share some lessons learned in his presentation. So Bruce will be hopefully as quality information as I got last night, because I really did appreciate everything. And the advice that he'll give today about some advice about new ventures and things to consider. Thank you, Mr. Lerman.
Thank you very much. It's been really exciting to be back on the campus at Iowa State. I do get back here a fair amount for games and events and things like that, so it's been good. But I got to tell you, it's been really exciting to see the difference in the curriculum, the focus on entrepreneurship, and just the way Iowa State, from the president to the dean of the business school to everybody in the organization, how they're aligned around how do we create the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the state of Iowa. So it's been really exciting to get to learn more about what's going on here and ways to get involved. And for those of you that want to get involved in that, I'd suggest that there's lots of opportunities to do that, and really cool stuff happening here. So learn more. So first of all, let's just see a show of hands in the room. Who has started or has wanted to start a company of their own? All right. Good group. I, like Micah, kind of knew from the day I was born that I was meant to start a company, be in charge of a company. I was in leadership roles throughout my high school career and beyond, and I really took to that kind of mission in my life to say, how do I become a leader? How do I be a better leader? How do I start a company? How do I grow a company? And so for me, the question always is asked, are entrepreneurs born or are they raised? And I think it's a combination of both, honestly. I think you have to have the desire and the tenacity, as Micah said, to do it. But you also can learn a lot from, the university, from other mentors that are in the room. I've learned a tremendous amount from everybody I talked to when I was starting my companies, and very helpful along the way. So just a little bit about me. I grew up on a small farm in eastern Iowa. I graduated, have a couple adult boys, both of them in the New York City area now. Love watching Cyclone games since we stormed the field in Columbia, Missouri in my senior year in college, to hanging out with George Niang at a rainstorm. Obviously, he was a little tougher than me and my college roommate because he was, out there in just a t-shirt and we had to wear ponchos. So, and then lastly, my picture of my family. My son got married in India, so it was a picture of us kind of just kicking off and heading to a wedding. So it was really a great part of our first part of this year. So one of the questions is always, people talk to me all the time about starting a company, and there's lots of people that want to be entrepreneurs, and they have, an idea, and they're like, this is just the greatest idea. What do you think of this idea? And I said, listen, ideas are not businesses. And, we talked a little bit about this last night, is, there's a big difference between having an idea and having a business. And so I talk to people a lot about, the things you need to do before, you actually start a business. What do you know about the industry besides just research? And that's, to me, having some basis in an industry or some background, I think increases the likelihood that you'll be successful. And from my experience, they say, it takes 10,000 hours to really know an industry, but you can get pretty close just by doing things in a related industry. Or, I think some of the most successful ones are, businesses where you're in a job, or you've had an internship, or you're doing some things and you learn about a need or a problem, and then you say, like, I can go address that problem. And having some background in industry other than just doing internet research, I think really helps the likelihood of being successful. And you can do that over time. You can learn an industry over time, but you think about, like, starting a company it's a ticking time bomb, right? There's so much cash and there's so much time. And if you're a student and you don't have to worry about making money, like, you can take some time to, like, understand and things like that. If you really need to start a company and start making money in some reasonable period of time, knowing that industry, it will shortcut the time to being successful. If you can build a good team, I know that as an investor, you could be a good a startup person, but can you build a good team? And that's a big difference. Leadership in a startup is so important. Having the right group of people, the complementary people. Talked to Peter Hong today a little bit about how he works with a lot of the startup companies in the area, making sure that they know like what's the personality type you need for one part of a company to complement kind of your strengths and weaknesses, and understanding that is so important in building a good team. And then do the work, build a plan. I was interesting in Volta, the company that we just sold a couple years ago. My one of the earliest venture capital investors said, "I have your original business plan that you sent to us. Would you be interested in seeing it?" I'm like, "Geez, Kurt, I don't know if I want to see it or not. Like, I don't know if it's any good or not." And it turned out it was pretty good. Like, it was pretty well thought out. I was pretty proud of what we got done in 2006 when we built that plan. So, but we did the work. We built a plan. We talked to a lot of people about it in the industry, outside the industry, potential customers, and we really honed in a good plan before we launched the business. The other thing, I talk a lot to startup interested people is really get realistic with what it's going to cost to get to an MVP or to revenue, because it takes time, takes money, and if you underestimate how much time it will take you to get there, really, you could end up just running out of time or money to get your business off the ground. And so make sure, before you actually launch, you have a good assessment of what that really means, because the worst thing you can have is launching a company only to find out that you don't have time or money to get to an MVP, and now you've just, started and probably not ever realized that business if you can't get capital to start it. So, and then that leads into the financing plan. Do you have a good finance plan? I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of financing that startups can use. But having a plan for when you're going to need what type of money, and having some of that stuff kind of lined up ahead of time is really sage advice. And then setting up your business for success, including things like having a good accountant set up your chart of accounts and make sure that your systems are in line, because even though you're a small company today, you want to be a big company, and having your business set up correctly, your operating agreements, your buy sells, like all the things that are that a good attorney can do for you, like you have to do that stuff to be a relevant company. And so again, factor that kind of stuff into the plan and the money you need to do it. And all that comes down to is when do you execute on the startup? So going from idea, getting a business plan, getting all your ducks in a row. If there's stuff that you need from IP, attorneys, that kind of stuff, get as much of that stuff done before you start the company. Because once you start the company, you kind of start the clock on expenses and your need to, get employees involved, and now you have responsibility for what they're doing. So making sure you know when the right time to do that startup is really important. Any questions thus far? Yeah, financing a company. And so it was interesting. We just had a conversation about this with the some of Peter Hong and Hannah's group about the different types of financing. And I think it's interesting because some of you in the room obviously understand all this stuff better than I do. But I will tell you that when I started a company, I didn't understand how any of this stuff worked. So first way that most people start companies is taking out personal savings, taking on some debt potentially. I don't really recommend that if you can help it. But it's always good to investors if the principals have put some of their money or all their money in some cases into this. I mean, it really means that you're committed to it and you're just not looking for somebody else's money. Sweat equity is another way. I mean, so the companies that I've started, started without a paycheck. And so you work and work until you can get to a point where you can finally get a paycheck. And, the good and bad with sweat equity is that your next round investors don't really give a crap that you spent all this time on sweat equity. But, if you've put hard dollars in, they put a lot of value in that, but the sweat equity is less valuable, but it's still valuable to the business because you're not taking cash out of the business, you're continuing to invest in the business. But just don't expect somebody to give you full boat credit for sweat equity, unfortunately. A great way to get financing for a company is through, local, state, federal programs. There's a lot of grants, low interest loans, things that are available for startup companies and companies that are could be very large. I mean, I was working with a company the other day that they're looking at almost $1 billion grant. They're taking an old uranium mining location and they're going to convert that into a new manufacturing area. And so there's about $1 billion in grants available. So it's not just the $50,000 grant that you can get from the state of Iowa or the $100,000 grant that you can get from SBIR. There's money available for programs, and I'll tell you, if you can qualify for grants, I mean that's like free money. So get as much of that as you can. Just don't spend all of your time doing it. So I mean, it takes time to get all these programs. I mean, we were talking just about SBIR. From start to finish, it's probably 8 months to get that money. But it's great to get, but if you need money in 2 months, it's not a great source for you. Friends and family is another way that a lot of people fund their businesses. I've had some friends and family invest in my companies, and I always say, if you take friends and family money, make sure you know that if you don't return that money, they may not be family or friends with you anymore because they do expect money back, as all investors do. But when it's a personal relationship like that, just make sure that everybody is going in eyes wide open, that, startup companies are, there's a lot of them that fail and, people lose their money. So I always caution people about taking friends and family money for that reason, unless they truly are in a situation where that money doesn't matter to them. It can create some real bad dynamics potentially. I've been fortunate that we've had good friends and family rounds, but it's not always the case. Angel investor and local, seed funds or even some small venture funds are a great source of capital. Kind of as you've gotten to a point where you have your MVP done or you're starting to show some traction in the market. You're not quite at a point where some of the big VC funds or private equity would be interested. You're still early on. You're still proving out your case, but at least you have some revenue going and a real path to growth. That's a great time to get angel investors or seed funds in. This is going to be a round that's going to be somewhere in the, let's say, $1 million to $5 million rounds are typical for kind of this level of investment. And these are generally fairly patient capital. They're generally good partners to have. And they generally will have, the good ones will have follow-on money to bring in if you need it. Kind of the big, as you mature your company and now you're in a mode where you really are scaling, and the only thing that's keeping you from growing from a $3 to $5 million company to a $30 million company is just access to cash. This is a great place for venture funds to get involved. And one of the comments that was made today on a call that I think is great, and I'm going to steal it because that's what entrepreneurs do. They steal ideas shamelessly. Is they said, venture funds are like the jet fuel you need for a business, but if you don't have a jet, don't take the fuel. So, it's going to be really painful for you if you have a 65 Chevy and you just got 1,000 pounds of jet fuel. And that's the case with a lot of these as we get to the venture and private equity. And this is really, they call it more professional money, institutional money. And so it's a different process to go through. They're looking at different rates of return. They're looking at risk differently. They're doing due diligence that lasts, months, not, weeks, like some of the, earlier stage money can be. It's private equity and venture funds. One of the lines that I did get from one of my investors, which I think is appropriate, is you get the capital you deserve. And really what that means is there's really great venture funds. There's really great private equity funds. I've been fortunate to have good relationship with both. But I've also seen a lot of people that haven't had great plans, didn't get great partners, and had really bad luck with how those organizations operate. So there's people talk about vulture funds and venture funds, and the vulture funds can be the ones that look at businesses that are not quite as good, but the people need money and they're willing to take money at any cost. You tend to attract a lesser quality venture fund in those situations. My advice is try to build your business so that your valuation, the opportunity to scale the business, and the track record of you and your team are such that you have choices on the type of capital you want and who you want to go get that capital from. When we were raising our first round of private equity for Involta, now we had spent time with all kinds of private equity folks over a course of years, building relationships. And we got down to there was 2 companies that we wanted money from. And we told both of them, we're only going to run a process for 2 people. It's you 2. We think you're the best in the industry. And, we're more flexible on price to make sure that we have the right partner in place. And so they both got engaged, and we ended up having really great offers. But, we were fortunate that we had positioned the business, had built the relationships, had did all the things that got us to a point where we could get the right capital for the business. The last area of financing is debt, and there's numerous forms of debt. But one of the things that I would tell you is a lot of people think debt would come early in the cycle of a business, and it's really just the opposite. Debt is something that comes later in a business. Many people go to their local bank that they've been with for their whole life, and they say, hey, I want to start this company. Like, why don't you loan me some money? And they say, like, oh, well, our bank loans money at 7% and we get money at 4%. There's a 3% spread there. We don't have any risk capital at that spread. There's no way banks are not designed to loan money to startup companies. That is not in their charter at all. There's no reason any bank should loan money to a startup if they're any good, unless you're independently wealthy and you can just tap a line of credit or something like that. But banks look for 2 things. Number 1, the business cash flow has to be able to pay the bank back. That's number 1. That they look at the debt service coverage ratio of how much money you're producing out of the business that can go to pay that loan back. They discount that quite a bit, and then they say this is how much money we'll loan you. Beyond that, as a scaling company, they generally also ask for personal guarantees from the founders. So that's another thing that you need to think about is, are you willing to put up all of your own assets kind of as collateral for debt financing? And this is all very typical. Now, as your company gets larger and larger, more cash flow, more availability, maybe you're private equity backed, personal guarantees, all that stuff kind of go out, and they depend then on, that private equity or that venture capital is not going to let the company default on its debt. So they have a different methodology. They still look for the cash flow of the business, but they also look for the reputation of the private equity group. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're going to get into my first startup, which was in 1996. But just in general, the internet, around 1983 was invented. I pulled out an e-marketing book that I bought in 1997. So how many Fortune 500 companies had a website in 1997? Anybody take a guess? Rough numbers.
25.
What?
25.
There were only two-thirds of the Fortune 500 companies in 1997 had a website, which is really kind of hard to believe, right? I mean, the technology was around for a long time. I mean, we were already working with building streaming media. Amazon's up and running, selling books, and you're able to buy domain names online. I mean, all this stuff is going on, and to think that Fortune 500 companies, only two-thirds of them had a presence. And what that, I think, shows you is that, technology, even as impactful as the internet, it's sometimes much slower to develop than what you think. And I would say in relation to the internet, it's also much larger than anybody thought it would ever be. So in some ways, it's really, like as an entrepreneur, you're thinking like, God, like everybody should be doing this stuff, right? And I'll tell you, that's really how I thought in 1996. 1996, started a company doing video conferencing, video streaming for, mostly for businesses that wanted to take their maybe live content and distribute it out to all their employees. We put together a series of educational programs from, educators from Harvard and MIT and schools like that, and then we distribute that out as content. But you had to think, so in many cases in 1998, computers didn't have sound cards. So employees that wanted to do this, they couldn't even access live video streaming because they didn't have a sound card. Or if they wanted to have a camera, that their IT group had put glue in all of the USB joints for security reasons. I mean, this was the reality that we had. So talking about like starting a company, it may have been just a little too early in 1996, but we got the business up and running and made it a really great business. We had, the opportunity to work with some great organizations. Intel was an early supporter, and we became their business platform for streaming, which is really helpful. I'm going to touch on one thing. I'm going to go back just a second. The before the leap thing, the be realistic and be specific. This has to do with things like market size. And so when I look at business plans from people and they say, this business is a $50 billion industry, and if we can just capture 3% of that, this is the size of our business. Like, no, your portion of that $50 billion industry is about $300 million, and you'll be, like, let's say you capture 10% of it's $30 million. That's realistic. And so I think, when people work on business plans, I mean, sometimes, they'll say things that as investors and people in the industry, like recoil against, and it's things like, we're going to be the Uber of this industry, or we're going to be the this of this industry. It's like, you know what? Like, stop saying that stuff. It doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, maybe you will. That'd be great. But just not that many. There's so many great businesses that can grow from 0 to 100 million or 300 million that don't have to be, $50 billion to be really successful for everyone involved. So, I mean, start where you are and have a vision of being the next Uber, but keep that to yourself. One of the things I talk about too is just being bold in the space entrepreneurially. We were working with a bunch of local educators, people that did classes, and we're trying to get nationwide appeal for this with Fortune 500 companies to subscribe to a educational program. And, it was hard because we didn't have national level talent that was listed in these programs. So one day I told my partner at the time, I said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to call Harvard. So I call Harvard and talk to the head of their distance education program. I said, hey, we're going to be in Boston working with MIT, and we're talking about getting some of their professors to do some distance learning programs. Want to know if you'd have some time to meet. And the guy's like, well, yeah, we'd love to meet with you. So next call, MIT. Hey, yeah, we're meeting with so-and-so at Harvard to talk about, it maybe was a little, but it worked. And we ended up with professors from Harvard and Yale and MIT and all kinds of places that really created a great program for us. And then got us, opportunities with Intel as they were thinking about, doing this. I mean, the kind of reputation we had, some of the customers we were working with, got them to a point where they said, like, you're the best in the industry. And, it was a nascent industry. There was probably 4 or 5 companies doing streaming media, which turns out none of us should have been doing it at the time. But it was fun. The other thing that I would say to people is, like, be number 1 or 2 in your space. It's a quote from Jack Welch. And defining, where you are in that. I mean, think about you going in a sales meeting and saying to somebody, we're probably your 6th or 7th best choice, but here's why you should use this. No, like, that's not how you do it. You have to think about, like, defining what you're going to be good at and then go be the best at it. And, it can be as small as saying, like, I have a coffee shop and I'm going to have the best coffee in this 3-block radius, or it could be, in streaming media, like, we're going to be the best in business communication, streaming and live streaming videos. And, that's the market we identified, and then we went out and we did it. But I think making sure that you define the business that you can be the best in is really important, because otherwise you're a me too, and revenue doesn't come easy in a small business. And if you can't, clearly articulate why you're the best, it's going to be really difficult. Okay, so the company that I started next was Involta, and that's a data center IT services business. And one of the questions was, how did you, start off in this business? And, for me, in the LiveWare 5 days, we had to find a place that we could get reliable internet to do these live streaming events. And so we put our stuff in the first internet data center in the world was in Palo Alto, the Palo Alto Internet Exchange. And I really like that model because it's kind of a real estate model, so you can think about getting debt financing. It doesn't take a ton of people to do it, so I really like that industry. And through the .com growth and the bust, there was a lot of data centers built and overcapacity. But by about 2005, all that excess capacity had been absorbed. And a friend of mine asked me if I'd be interested in taking over a data center that he owned, that the people had vacated. And so that's really how we started. And really the model for us was to own these the real estate. So build, own, and operate data centers in secondary markets. There's about 8 markets around the country that are primary data center markets that have most of the market share. But there's a lot of secondary markets, think like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Tucson, Boise, Cedar Rapids. And, those are the markets that we went after and found a really good niche there. So we couldn't play and say we're going to be the best provider to Amazon in Northern Virginia, but we could be the best in these secondary markets. The other thing, we had the ability to look at the business models that worked in these tier 1 markets, as we call them, and build a similar model, just a little smaller. And so we were able to basically take that business model and apply it to the markets we wanted to serve, which kind of goes to another point, which means, like, you don't have to have, like, the greatest idea in the world to start a great business. You can just take somebody else's great idea and modify it to, a little bit different way of servicing a customer. And so, that's what we did, and grew the business really well. We were Inc. 500 fastest growing company at number 40 and number 2 in tech services. I talked a little bit about our exit to MC Partners in 2014, and then sold the company in 2022. Really great opportunity for everybody from, the people that started with us early on to MC Partners ended up I think we were the highest, multiple they had in the fund that we were in. And, Carlyle's in the process of, being on their, 5-year path to saying how can they, make their money on us. And I think they're going to do very well. So in the data center industry today, and some of you guys already know this because I talked a little bit about it last night, but there's actually 2 right answers. What are the biggest challenges for the data center industry today? Anybody have an idea?
Cloud providers.
What?
Amazon, Microsoft, Google.
Yeah, I would put them in as a data center. So yeah, but that's for a cloud service provider like us, they would be a big one.
Scale?
Yeah, you know what? The biggest thing right now is power. So the AI engines, the NVIDIA chips, they're creating so much demand for power that they're building, you think about when we first started building our data centers, they'd be 1 megawatt of capacity of critical power. They're building 100 megawatt data centers and gigawatt data centers. They have so much demand right now. Amazon, Microsoft, one announced over $100 billion commitment to their AI data centers over the next few years. The other one, $150 billion just in AI data centers. Amazon's need for power is so great, they just bought a nuclear power plant from Talon Energy. So, it's amazing. The second right answer is regulatory stuff because of all of the power demands. They're like Northern Virginia, they've sold out all the power for the next 4 or 5 years. So, imagine trying to do anything else in Northern Virginia or some of these other markets. They're just absorbing all of the available power capacity. All right. So I've talked a lot about some of the things that are important, but I would say people. Like in real estate, it's location, location, location. In businesses, it's people, people, people. And one of the things we talked about is making sure that the right leader is in place is probably more important than most people think. And I've learned this really the hard way. Is that I kind of thought everybody's like me, everybody can start a business, anybody could run a company. It's just not true, and I've made that mistake before. Building trust with your team, communicating, over communicating, so valuable in a startup. Everybody is trying to figure out what to do, how to do it. There's so many things moving at the same time, and just making sure that you're building trust with people, communicating, and then creating the culture that you really want to have as the legacy of the business. And that culture to me, may be one of the most important things that we create in a business, because when people leave, that culture can still permeate. So when I leave, there's still 350 people there that have bought into the culture of the business, and as they leave, there's still 350 or 400 people that still live that culture. And I think that that's so important to building sustainable businesses. The right market is really important. So for me, I would say I sold shoes in college. I don't like the general population. I didn't want a business that I had to deal with the general population every day. So, it has to fit your personality well to be able to do that. But also, what is your expectation of growth? Do you want to grow a $100,000 coffee shop? Do you want to build a $100 million company? Do you want to create a $10 billion company? Because it's so important that you do that right. Because if you have the ability, like if you get 100% of the market share and you're going to make $1 million of revenue, is that something that you want to start a business for? I mean, is the overused term right now is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is all that work of creating a company worth it if you max yourself out at $1 million in revenue? That's something only you can figure out. Strategy, can you achieve the goal to be number one? And then one of the other things that I talk a little bit about is, M&A ability, and we can get into this a little bit different, but there's a lot of people that, do M&A because they just want to be bigger. But there's really, the opportunity for M&A should lend itself to kind of that 1 + 1 = 3 concept. And if you can't really do an M&A to say, this is how this makes this so much better as a combined organization, because the risk, you're going to lose employees out of this, I almost guaranteed. You're going to have some of the customers are going to say, we don't want to go with this new company. There's going to be all these things that degrade from the value of that acquisition. And so it really has to be an overwhelming reason to do this, because just being bigger isn't better. I mean, at the end of the day, what you really want to do is build value. So raising capital, we talked a little bit about this last night at dinner, is this risk and return concept. And when I have thought about how do you raise capital, I think about, there's two things that an investor thinks about. They think about the return, greed, like what happens if I don't do this? Am I going to be really pissed that this thing 10X's on me? Or, the risk of like, what if this thing goes away? And as much as you can de-risk the business, people see better opportunities, and that return aspect, the greed aspect, overwhelms the risk aspect of the business, and people will do that. I think as an entrepreneur, as a leader, somebody raising capital, I mean, being smart, humble, curious, so important to the process. I mean, people have to believe that you are the right steward for their capital over the next 5, 7, 10 years, whatever that is, that you respect that and their relationship to what you need to do for them to get them a return on their capital. So how much time do I have left? Am I good for a little bit? Okay. I'm going to go through these really quickly. There's too much here for the time we have left, but one of the things as an entrepreneur, I would say I always thought about, what are all the things that I have to do next? Like, we have to get this deal done. We have to, build this product. We have to get this thing. And so it's really hard sometimes when you only think about the things you have yet to do. So I've always made it really a big thing, like when we hit milestones, is to celebrate as a company, because you have to stop and celebrate occasionally when things really go well. And if you're like me and all you can think about is the things that you haven't gotten done yet, stopping and celebrating is really important. Do business with good people. My line I've always learned is, you can't do good business with bad people. You can't do bad business with good people. I'll give you an example. When we had the first self-publishing streaming media portal on the internet, the first people that started coming to us, no surprise, was the porn industry. And so, I think about taking home, people that I work with, having dinner with my family, and I was like, we're not doing this. That can't be, our business model. So anyway, could have made a lot of money. I know the guy that did do that business, and unfortunately, he can't sell his business now. Nobody wants to. No, there's no private equity group that wants to buy his business. I mean, he's probably making great money, but he can't sell it. Failure's not fatal. Like there's a lot of failures along the way in a startup. Just keep working at it, and if at the end you decide that it's failure, like there's lots of opportunity. I think people today respect that not every business is going to work, and that doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that something you needed to learn from, and it's a tuition payment. It's a friend of mine says these things that don't always go right. He doesn't call them failures. He calls them tuition payments. Don't underestimate complexity. I think about this in business models that are two-sided markets where you have to get two sides of a thing to work well. You have to get your users, and you got to get your content, or you have to have this and you have to have this. Like that just makes a business increasingly complex to be successful. So if you have a double-sided or multi-sided market, just think about that, because it's a really hard to execute kind of on let's say a technology and on both sides of that equation. So don't share big ideas until it's time. Really means like your board, your investors, like you may be dreaming about like what's a year from now or 5 years from now. They don't really want to hear about that. Honestly, they want to hear what you have that's fully baked. But they don't want to hear about ideas. Don't share ideas until you're ready to really share them and they're fully baked. I'm going to skip around here. Not everyone scales with the company, which this means is, as a founder, as a person that came in early on to the business, I would say that, I had a meeting annually with a couple of my board members where I would say, if I'm not scaling with the business, it'll be a really short conversation, and we'll work on finding a new CEO, because I had started from startup to growing the business to being fairly large, and guess what? Everybody has a point where they're no longer able to scale with the company, and sometimes it's your friend, sometimes it's somebody that's done great things in the business for the first 5 to 7 years, but can't continue to scale with that company. And I've seen that enough times that it's really hard in an organization. But you have to continue to power build the right team for the right time. Always take the high road. Think long term. I can't tell you how many people that I have dealt with that have done kind of crappy things to people over their years, and then 10 years, 20 years down the road, they're like, God, I can't find a job. Like, no one will hire me. It's like, well, because they call around and talk to everybody that you ever worked with, and they didn't say good things about you. I can tell you that the world is incredibly small, and if you think that something you do negative to somebody won't get around, you're wrong. Also, conversely, if you continue to do what's right for people, take their best interest ahead of your own, good things will happen to you. So I don't think about karma being mystical. I think about it as like, are you giving good things to the world, and that stuff will come back to you. Leaders always get more credit than they deserve. This is when things go well. Leaders get like credit, like they're doing such a great job, and the world evolves around them. But the reality is, it's a team, right? And a well-functioning team is what makes a great company. A leader also gets more of the blame when things go bad too. So it is a good and bad thing. But I would say just make sure that as a leader you understand that it's not. This isn't when things are going well and everyone's saying how great you are. Like, you just remember that this is a team sport. How you react when you're down, I would say, businesses go up and down, and not everything is linear. I've seen some things where you think the whole business is going to collapse, and the question is, like, how do you react in those situations? I mean, do panic? Do you just drive forward with the vision, commitment, and keep people moving? I mean, so think about that, because anybody, can look good when times are good, but how you react when you're down is probably the biggest determinant of your character. We talked a little bit about the de-risking your plan. Without risk, all you have left is upside. Something I learned is, if you're starting a product company and you come in, you say to an investor, I'm going to go build this product. We're going to go sell this product to these people, these types of people, blah, blah, blah. That's pretty risky. If you come in and say, we've engineered this product, we've gotten bids from 3 different suppliers, and this is what our costs are going to be to produce it. We've talked to these 5 customers, 3 of which said that they're willing to buy these if we produce them. That's de-risking the business quite a bit. So now an investor is going to say, I'm more interested in that than somebody that comes to me and says, I need to design this, then I need to build this, and I don't know what it's going to cost. I don't know if anybody's going to buy it. That's a very different situation. All right, I think the driving revenue is so important. I think a lot of people, kind of feel like creating this company and creating this product, but creating revenue is what the lifeline of a business is. And if you can't figure out how to drive revenue, you don't really have a business. And I think going into it, and I was talking about this a little bit last night, there was a lot of app startups. I'm sure Dave and others have seen these too. It's well, we're going to build this app, and then we're going to get 2 million downloads, and then we're going to monetize this in this way. It's I don't think so. That didn't work out very well. So think about how you're going to drive revenue, because in every scenario, revenue is really important. And right now, I would say, as startup companies, it's hard finding funding for companies that are burning a tremendous amount of cash. So I've seen, a lot of the companies that I've invested in have, cut some expenses to get the, cash flow break even. And it's much easier to raise capital in this market, in that scenario. So think about, how do you get the cash flow break even? And I'd say, for the students in the room, regardless of what you do, educate yourself in AI. I think everything that we're thinking about now is going to be impacted by AI. And, it's not just the data centers for AI, it's not just AWS and that, but it's all the things that AI is going to be doing over the next decades that will be so critical and create so much opportunity for the young people in this room. I'm a little jealous that I'm not part of that community. So it's, I think I might be past the AI age, but I'm still involved in it from an investor standpoint. So with that, I just want to thank Iowa State University, Juan, for bringing me in here today. Thank all of you for being here. I really appreciate everything that Iowa State's doing for entrepreneurs. When I went to school, entrepreneurs were the people that couldn't get a job in the Fortune 500 companies. And I think taking that and changing it, I think it creates tremendous amount of great jobs for people. It creates wealth for the right founders. And I would say that I really appreciate the effort that Iowa State has put into really expanding the entrepreneurship program here. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions? Yeah. So I'll start with the first, the only the college instructor I ever had that taught entrepreneurship. His name was Ed Molt, and he was in an industry. Did you know Ed? He had stuff like ran wastewater treatment plants and stuff like that, right? So he would say all the time, there's no MIT grad in the world that wants to come and build a better waste treatment plant. And so he was saying some of the most trendy business opportunities, a few years ago, everybody had a drone business. Today, everybody has an AI business. And I think AI is so important, but you have to think about there's so many people chasing these AI businesses, you really have to make sure that you're differentiating if you're going to start something in that AI world. Some of the internet, there's so many stories of, a trend that comes on the scene, and every smart college kid in the world says, we're going to create a business around this. Well, it makes it really hard to say, like, how do we differentiate between you and the thousands of other people that have just started in this industry, right? So that's where I think you have to make sure that you are able to, get above the noise of what those other companies are offering. Mm-hmm.
What was that term MVP?
Yeah, it's really about your minimum viable product. So it's kind of the first thing that you can bring to market that you can show people, and it may not work perfectly, but it works good enough that people can visualize and play with the thing, and potentially even sell in the marketplace as kind of an early version of what your product could be. A great example of MVP is when Google started Gmail, and they said, here's the 1 million features that Microsoft Outlook has, and these are we're going to do 10% of the ones we think are most important for people, and then we'll add more later if people tell us our product's no good because it doesn't do this, or this. And so they started with saying, like, let's just cut this down to this. This is going to be our minimum viable product.
What's the backstory on that one where you said tell true stories?
Oh, here's what I've only. I think everybody has to be a better storyteller. You have to get people into the story of your business, or the story of why you're doing certain things. And sometimes when people say tell stories, they mean like not real stories. They mean like made up stories. But I think it's important because I've had a lot of people pitch businesses to me, and at the end, I don't know what they're talking about. So they're not a very good storyteller if I'm a reasonably intelligent person, but when I get done listening to their message, I don't know what it means. So, like, if you can tell a story about like how people will use this product, or how people will, you can help solve a problem. I mean, that's much more important than giving somebody the details, the technical details of what it is, or, words that people don't understand, right? I mean, telling a story is really important, not only for, pitching a business, but communicating with your employees, like getting people bought into, the story it helps people remember and helps people buy into kind of what you're communicating. So I think it's really important that people learn to tell stories better. True stories. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So we're at a university, we educate, that's what we do, but it's so awesome to have somebody come in who's actually walked the walk, started companies to align with what we're teaching here, and sort of validate that what we're doing is the right thing. And I really appreciate your message about giving back. All I've heard from Bruce since he's been on campus is, let me know how I can help. I'll help you with that. Let me know what I can do. So thank you for being such a great Cyclone and alum. And thank you for being here today to everybody. Oh, and I forgot, I have a little gift for you, but it's for those of us in the room that know Ray and Jessica Schmidt, founders of Farm Story Meats. So it's a meat bundle from one of our student entrepreneurs, and we'll get that shipped to you. So thank you all for coming today.